morning.
Morning.
So we can just get started.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For the first years, Professor Rosengray is my current professor. So this is fun.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not doing studio work right now. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, it's somewhat related.
Yeah. Share my screen. So this is our concept board. We can get started right away. We're starting with Joey. And I will just kind of keep time and move around the concept board as we speak. And do you both have the concept board link as well?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. And let's see. Yes, great time. Okay. Joey, are you here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning. I'm Joey Tomsky. Could we zoom in on the maps and the site collages? All right. So at the beginning of this project, as Professor Nassa said, we were tasked with creating maps of the site, which kind of helped us understand the surrounding area. I chose Site 2, Copes. I noticed the way the trees were positioned, there was like a sense of multiple separate moments happening along the shore. With this in mind, I then created my site collages and tried to highlight the independent nature of the benches and the trees. In the site plan, you can see 3 openings, 2 of which are occupied by benches and 1 by the pavilion. You can see that here on the screen. If we could go down to the progress work, please, which reads from left to right. I was initially inspired by James Turrell's Sky Space, in which the user's view is constrained to one point. My pavilion gives the user a view of the fountain and the lagoon by orienting itself toward it. Another feature the pavilion has is its interaction with the surrounding trees, which was tested in multiple different ways as seen through my progress work. Finally, I was drawn to the use of walls in Nice's Barcelona pavilion. I created a rule for myself to not let the walls touch while still defining individual spaces. By doing this, I ended up making a curated experience for the user with a clear path to traverse through the building. If we could please move up to the plans and sections. So from here, you can see how the user would walk down a ramp and sink into the pavilion. Even though the ramp is positioned facing towards the fountain, there's still no visible view because a tree blocks the view. This is true for the entire first floor. The fountain view is hidden and only shown once at the top of the stairs. The space down below offers the option to look at a bioswale, which helps with prevent flooding, or sit down on a bench. And moving up through the project, the stair landing acts as an emergency exit or a quicker way for entering for people wandering around the park. The second floor features 3 separate moments, similar to earlier discussed on the site, how there's 3 separate moments. On the left of the stairs, you can look out into the trees, and on the right is where you can get a view of the fountain by either standing on the little overhang or sitting down on a bench in the back, which also offers an aerial view of the bioswale. In the axon and models, if we could please look down there, they better show how the spaces are separated in the different moments. The top floor and bottom floor have 2 distinct feelings. The bottom floor allows the user to see what I intend for them to see, so you have bioswale, no view of the fountain, while the top floor is more open to the entire park, and they can view whatever they please. The model especially demonstrates the connection between the trees and the pavilion. You can really see how, if they're standing on the overhang next to the stairs, they can interact with those 2 trees, and the tree in front of the pavilion blocks the view. Finally, looking at the scale interpretations right above the models, you can see better the final view of the fountain from sitting on the bench, or a walk down the ramp where you can get a little sneak peek of the fountain as if you were really there. Thank you for your time.
First off, congratulations. Very complete set of presentation. I'm just regretting that we can't do this in person because I've probably been looking at the models and admiring your craft and drawings, and you know, it's again very fine, well weighted drawings, so on and so forth. In you know, this virtual mode, it's a little bit hard to get, because there's so much information you put in here. It's a little bit hard to appreciate it in an instant moment. So, you know, forgive me for babbling here a little bit. I was wondering, I think one of the things you know, and perhaps this is just a kind of a beginning of critique on how you presented it. I think some of the things that the kind of the overall strategy of, you know, how you located and, you know, positioned your pavilion in a certain way is one of the key, I think, here. And I think you tried to explain that a little bit more in detail in the plans. However, the plans are actually a little bit too zoomed in. So you probably would have been better off if your site plan is use the site plan and explain in the model, actually. You know, models very well done, and even with the perspectival sort of a composite view, use that a little bit more kind of effectively to give the overall idea, and then, you know, go into walk us through in a little bit more in details in plans, in sections. Sections really important here. Okay, so, but long story short, can you tell us a little bit more about why you picked the certain location? Were you given the certain, you know, why in that corner? I think you had the the Corpse site, is that right?
Yeah, the Copes.
Yeah, Copes, yeah. And why do you select that particular slot?
Okay, so I positioned it in the corner. If we could go to like the site plan, might make it a little easier. I put it in the corner just because I wanted it to face towards the fountain, and in the other two openings there were already benches, and I know I probably could have removed those, but I didn't want to, you know, destroy like the surrounding area, if that makes sense.
So the fountain was one of the key objects. What else?
So the fountain, and then just the way the trees were positioned. The tree, if you look at the bottom right section, you can see the tree has like this really long branch that goes down into the water. I tried to show it on my drawing, but I just really liked this tree. And so it gave me like this idea of, you know, you could have an opening, but it's blocked by this tree because, you know, it has this big branch going down.
And where do we see that branch going down framed? Is that in the entry sequence or something?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Where's the perspectival view on that one? Do you have that?
I don't have the branch going down, but if you zoom in on the scale interpretations, you can see how in the middle picture, you can see how the tree blocks the path.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think also, you know, it's really nice to see really all of the presentations, as far as I can tell, in terms of the plethora of different depictions, right, or approaches to, you know, crafting and also representing the project, right? So it's nice to see these different methods, you know, from watercolor, sketches, right, models, study models, you know, photo collages. So I think that's really effective. I think this entry sequence, I agree that, taking maybe a stronger position in your drawings in regards to the positioning of the pavilion is a good suggestion, right? The site plan, your pavilion, and the fountain almost falls off the page, right? So, right, if that axis, right, tree, fountain, right, and pavilion is really the predominant one here, it seems like you really want to accentuate that in your plan drawing. And then you really want to articulate the initial descent into the pavilion a little bit better, right? So it would have been useful to have a section that cuts through that ramp, right? And also shows the relationship of that entry sequence to the tree, and then ultimately also the fountain, right? So a section that's maybe more zoomed out that documents those relationships, but specifically through the ramp, because we really don't see that anywhere but, in the plan, but also in that center, photo collage. And so, or montage, or model photo. Right, so that would have been really helpful, right, to really articulate that entry sequence and really the most important aspect to the pavilion, which is the positioning and that initial response. To me, maybe it becomes a little bit too loose on the upper level. It's very open, which is nice. But if this is about shifting walls and framing specific views, as you're indicating in some of your sketches, it maybe dematerializes a bit too much on the upper level. Maybe losing a little bit of the intent in regards to what views are framed or forced, or the experiences that are supposed to be created up there. But I think overall, this is a great, concluding first year project. And I also appreciated the way you presented it in regards to the phrases that you used, and you tried to describe it. So, as you're segueing, right, this is all about a segue into second year. Annie knows all about that, right? As you're segueing, right, you want to pay attention to the site, right, and the relationship of the building to the site, right, and kind of the reasoning for positioning and how that is best, articulated or demonstrated.
Yeah, I would maybe add. I totally agree, and maybe talk just a little bit in addition, sort of architecturally. I think one thing that's sort of not missing, but left out perhaps from a compositional perspective is something like railing, guardrails. When you're up high, if you're positioning people above 18-inch from the ground and up, so certainly at the second level, you have to give them guardrails so that people won't fall. And guardrail shouldn't just be treated as a rail, something that prevents from people to fall off. It's more, if you're using the vocabulary, looking at the vocabulary that you're looking at, it's a partial height wall that has a spatial meaning. So, those things would start to give a little bit more definition to the space. And right now, I don't think you have those, right? It almost like you can just jump into the pond from the second floor. No?
Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. And you're articulating those when you descend into it, just by descending into it, you're creating a certain spatial definition. So, and it's a necessary component from a safety perspective. So why not use that as part of your spatial composition is the point.
Also, if this idea of these, you know, slipping planes, right? And vertical planes, again, that are kind of, you know, this dematerialized object in that regard. If that is really the predominant idea, don't be, you know, like, oh, my line is really thick here, but I'm drawing on concept board. Hold on, let me make this thinner. And it shouldn't be a dashed line. So, right, don't be afraid of, you know, accentuating, you know, like the right, the walls. I'm drawing this too big now, right? But right, but my point is, right, like there's opportunity to draw things out, right, and extend them beyond the realm of the building, right? Not in all directions maybe, but where it matters, right, or where it creates an interesting, you know, spatial configuration, either on the inside or as a relationship between inside and outside, or framing views, as I said before. So so don't, right, and things don't have to be, you know, entirely contained within the small footprint that, you know, ultimately was given to you, right? You can extend, you can exaggerate, right? You can you know, draw attention to specific things through these extensions, right? So think freely in that regard, if it's appropriate, right? Sorry, I'm going to erase this again because this is not helpful, but you get the idea.
Annie, do we still have some time?
We have 1 or 2 more minutes,
Okay.
but we can also move on. if we need to.
Okay. No, I'll probably just make one more kind of a graphic comments. So why don't we, since we're looking at the plans and sections, and I don't know what kind of, you know, it seems like you guys are given some template to fit things, and that's fine. But I do think you need to think in terms of how the plans relates to the direction of section, or section relates to the plan, or something. Number one, and number two, if there is an opportunity, and number two. The way you're drawing the first floor plan or the ground floor, which is cut in underground, and the plan on the ground level above is a little bit confusing to me, because you probably want to prioritize, again, this is a contextual thing, you prioritize the upper floor plan so you can see the ground cover and the transition into the water, because that's really important. Also, in this scale, you also want to see the tree trunk. I think that's actually really important to be able to see it, because your project is, you know, partially one of the important components is that we want to see that. And that's actually, because you said it, it's an architectural component that needs to be shown in plan, right? And you know, the plan seems like, okay, so the north is up, right? Looks like, so, you know, it's hard to say, okay, so is the section, if we have a section, I'm not good at drawing
We have
here.
1
but
more minute with Joe.
yeah, this way, right? That section wants to be over here. Over here. Is that what am I seeing? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's so you know, but it seems like you want to make sure the scale's slightly different off, isn't it not? For the alignment?
I tried to get as good as I could in Photoshop.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that something like that is just a matter of practice. But because, again, I see the tree here, but oh, there's a tree element. Would you draw a canopy, as a dash line? So on and so forth. But good, that's kind of a nitty-picky stuff.
Great, thank you, Joey. Next we have Emma.
Very good.
Hi, sorry, I had some trouble with my computer just now, of course. But can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. One moment, sorry. Of course, right before I'm about to go. Okay, so I'm Emma Clark, and for this project, I designed a tree house. So to begin with, my pavilion is situated in the canopy area of Audubon. And if you zoom into my site maps, please. So I actually began with the axis because I thought that I can make something here to relate with the path, the fountain, and the benches that are included in it. But I actually ended up going with the canopy because I was really attracted to this great tree here, which has branches that extend from the walking path to touch the pond. And if we go into my maps, you can see that on the top one, the very top map, this is just about, I noted that most visitors of the park turn towards the west or towards the right of the entrance and follow the loop around this way around the park, meaning that the canopy is the last area that visitors cross there before departing. And so this traffic pattern, both on foot, on bike, roller skates, whatever you might be, is important with the placement of my pavilion. So if you look at my site plan, you can see both the elevation from the pond to the grass, as well as the relationship of the pavilion to the tree. The orientation of the pavilion on this eastern side of the tree is significant, as it's not clearly visible when you enter the park, but rather it reveals itself to you as you're a visitor right about to leave the park. It's sort of mysterious in that way. And my intention with my pavilion was to create a hidden space that reveals itself only to those who are curious enough to go looking for it. So you have to go and be in the park usually most people don't turn this way, and to see it. And I knew that I wanted to make a tree house after having one as a kid, and I love the playful and like youthful energy it reminds me of. And I also felt like there were plenty of spaces on the ground to view the pond and the other sites of the trees, the other sites of the park. So I was more concerned with creating a new relationship with a visitor and the tree when creating my pavilion. So now if we can go to my plans, you can see you can approach the pavilion using probably a stone path from the concrete pavement. And you're first greeted by a horizontal lattice-like structure that has a winding staircase enclosed. And you can see in my sections how these really skinny horizontal poles almost, if we can go down to my sections, please. Yeah, you can see how I have this sort of like lattice-like structure of these horizontal poles that overlap to create almost a cage in which there's this winding staircase. And this is purposeful. I wanted to keep the pavilion, at least the bottom floor, pretty light to sort of match the skinniness and the narrowness of the branches as they get smaller as they grow up. And then as you travel up the winding staircase, you land on a second story, which at the second level, after you go through like a little entranceway, you are faced with a completely open wall that faces in towards the heart of the tree. And there are no windows on the other walls, no slots or anything. And this is purposeful. So all of your direction is fully towards the tree. You're confronted by it and you must look at it and to gain a new perspective on the tree. Like I said before, there are already numerous places to observe the rest of the parts of the park, such as the pond, but the goal here is to feel like you're almost climbing the tree. You're within the branches while also having sort of this place of solace maybe, or to rest after exercising in the park. Now if you go to my axon, please. You can see here the open side of the upper level of my pavilion. There's a railing for safety, obviously, and then there's also a small bench on the opposite side on which I can imagine someone reclining to rest after a workout in the park or just hanging out to read a book. I also included an imagined concrete pavilion on the ground just over where the second story overhangs, sort of to fill in that shadow. Maybe this could be a place to set up some chairs, a blanket or a picnic, or just somewhere to take a rest off the path. And lastly, if you look at my progress work, you can see some of the play that I had with the treehouse, trying to figure out how to situate it with the tree. I kind of moved around my pavilion a lot with its relationship with the tree, moving in and out of it. I didn't want to be too close to where I would be potentially harming it, but I still wanted to be close enough to where you really felt fully immersed in the tree. How far to extend like this lattice-like structure. So I did a lot of good play here and I enjoyed it a lot, so thank you.
Ursula, you want to start us off?
Go ahead, Kentaro.
Well, no, I went first. That's fine.
Oh,
so.
please, please go ahead. Go ahead. I need more time to digest.
Yeah. So, well, again, perhaps from here on, you guys, if you're presenting, you can use, if you're on the Zoom, you can use a pointer tool, right? So, because when you say here and this and that, we're not seeing, your cursor or anything. So if you can use the pointer tool, where's the pointer tool here? Or at least mouse that everybody could see where what we're talking about. That will be great. Annie, do you know?
I'm not
Normally it
familiar
has a pointer tool.
Yeah,
but I don't
I've never
see
used
it.
that before. I can use
No.
my mouse more when I
Yeah.
know what people are talking about.
And you said something about the wall. Can you go to the plan and talk about? Well, so first of all, the big picture is the tree. You have the big tree, beautiful tree. You draw it so nicely and expressively. It's great oak tree. And then you have two cubes. One is kind of a light and airy, or stacked slats, horizontal, and the other one is relatively more solid. So you're kind of contrasting ground level, a little bit more open and translucent, and the upper level more confined and directs the view. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, and there is no, you said all four sides is, or three side is pretty solid, and there's only one opening towards the pond, so to speak. Is that right?
So it's the tree, I think.
Yes, the one
Is
opening
it towards the tree?
Yes, it's towards the heart of the tree. That's a conceptual goal, that is you're forced to confront the tree and look at it.
Okay.
In
So
this new
where
way.
is the perspective? Where's the
Confrontation.
perspective?
Yeah.
Do you have a perspective, or at least like the model photo, composite model photo?
Yes, I have those. There are 4 model photos here. If you...
No, composite perspectival view.
I do not. Scaled
interpretation. I think that's the most important one. If that's the case, I think it's a pretty a radical move where normally when you come to the site, you expect the pond to be the sort of the object of view, but you're purposely turning it into the tree, so to speak. And I want to see that. That's a pretty radical sort of move you're making, and it would definitely get noticed, right? But I want to see that, and I don't necessarily see it in section either. I see it in, in elevation. You see the tree, so the elevation is tree elevation. I want to see it in section what the top space relative to the tree. And the top space could be a section, and the tree could show up in elevation. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the key, and I want to feel that, what that feels like.
I think, it's, I agree with that. I mean, this project is about, these two very simple, stacked boxes, offset boxes, and the relationship to this tree. And so the focus is really about this relationship. And I think what's missing a little bit in the presentation, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? It's very minimal, right? And, very precise. But with that precision comes a needed focus on really examining the positioning, right, of this pavilion, right, with its upper level opening to the tree, right? What is the relationship, right? Like, and I think that has to be very carefully looked at, and it just appears slightly different in the different drawings, right? That very zoomed out side plan, right? The relationship to the trunk of the tree. It probably would be useful to show, at least indicate the canopy on that as well. That's the 16 scale side plan. Your pavilion seems really small in that plan, but I'm not sure where that comes from. But then if you go to the 1/4 inch plan, the relationship seems to be different, right? You're closer to the trunk, right? And maybe rotated a little further down. And then in the elevation, it's slightly different again, it seems, because you're more just, parallel to the trunk in a way. So that's a little misleading, right? And I would encourage to be very precise about that, when it, like for a project like this, right? That's the key of the project, that relationship. So what is the distance of the trunk to the pavilion, right? And then also the height relationship. What is the perfect relationship, certainly of the upper box to the height of the tree, right? What do I really see at that elevation? Right, and I think that is certainly something that would come out in a section or a sectional study, right? How is that upper level positioned to exactly capture a certain moment, within the, the mature growth of the tree, right, or the configuration of the tree? What do I see? So I think that's where you're a little vague at the moment, and I think that's where more precision would be needed to really get that point across. And the fact that you're not showing it in the montages is something that is unfortunate in a way, because I think it's a great opportunity to really highlight that feature, right? Even in your photographs, I think you're photographing, the bigger photo collage is or montage rather, is taken from the other side, it seems, right? So not from the side where the pavilion is located, right? The left one. Is that correct? It seems like we're standing on the other side, right? So
The opposite side.
yeah, so you really want to make sure that you're, in your documentation, right, and then in your articulation of the project, you get that point across, and you really investigate it. What is the perfect relationship for the purpose of this pavilion?
We have 1 more minute.
Okay. So I think just one last thing I will add is kind of again, kind of tectonic or compositional issues. I think, in EXO, I see a little bit of the move where you indicate the square slab offset against the 2 cubes, right? That slab and the thickness of the slab is an important one relation, and that starts to articulate the relation to the ground plane and the transition from the ground to the kind of a first floor level light cube, let's say. Now, I say that because I think if you look at your models, the slab's not there, and the section slab's not there, and it sort of makes the relationship between the first floor, the horizontal slab cube, a little bit how can I say? unsure what the relationship is. It floating? Is it not? It's sitting on the ground. You know, it's a little bit vague, right? I do think that maybe it is floating a little bit. And all the posts, you know, for the way you structure this needs to be thought of in a way that accentuate that, or it engages the ground further. I think right now it's slightly ambiguous, and I think there's an opportunity to articulate that one relationship is about the top floor and the tree. You know, at the ground level, you kind of want to establish your relationship to the ground and probably the pond, and how you navigate that reorientation of that is about this project. So, you know, you can strengthen that by articulating your attitude, clearly articulating your attitude to the ground.
Yeah, that slab is something I just added in like last minute, but I didn't really, that's why it's not in the other sections and stuff, so.
But that's a really important element.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
Great. Thank you, Emma. Next up is Shane. Here.
So, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Morning. My name is Shane Curtis. I guess we could look at the site plan first. The big thing for me with this project was getting away from like the stresses of college and daily life in New Orleans. Something I really focused on was being able to be out in the middle of nature at Audubon. So if you zoom in on the site plan, you can see that my pavilion hangs. It looks like it hangs over the water a little bit. It actually goes down into the water, and the inspiration behind that was at the city park. There's the MoMA. There's like this walkway that goes under like a bridge, and the water level goes right up to like the top of it. And I thought that was a really cool way to like experience nature in a different way and get away from everything. I tried to incorporate that into my design. Also, there I included planters to the left of the stairs. Thank you. On the left of the stairs to kind of bring the idea of nature with you down as you go towards the water, so that the only thing stopping you from, you know, getting full nature, like I guess like meditation experience is really just, I guess the I don't know how to phrase it, the materials that we're going to be made out of. So if you're surrounded by water and surrounded by plants and all that stuff, of course, important to me, which I incorporate that into this. Can you zoom out a little bit?
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, is this better?
Yes.
Can you scroll down a little bit, Annie? Yeah, so if you look at my axon, it's maybe a little better idea of what I'm trying to talk about, how it goes down into the water. Same with the models on the left side as well. If you look at I can't remember what it's called, but the bottom right, where it shows like the history of the work, you can see that, yeah, it is kind of similar, but it also does show a design process. Like, for instance, in the middle on the right side, I used to have 2 staircases with a hole in the middle, but I figured that it just wasn't, this didn't incorporate nature the right way, the way that I wanted it to, so I changed it up. Yeah, I know that was really quick, but that's kind of all I got. So.
It seems like you arrived at this version of your proposal pretty quickly, looking at your progress drawings. Were there any other thoughts or considerations that you considered in the beginning that led to this solution? Any other iterations?
Not really. I mean, I started wanting to, like, I wanted part of it to be in the water, like I had it from the very beginning, and it was kind of just a process of how I was going to do that. So yeah, I mean, I did reach this design really quick, and then after that, it was kind of just tweaking some things like the benches and all that kind of stuff. But that was pretty much how it was for the entirety of the assignment.
And the end part, is that immersed into the water? It's very hard to
Yeah.
tell from your
Yes.
drawings.
Yeah.
Okay, so the diagonal hatch in the section, that is water?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, as part, you know, and that's just, you know, thinking ahead, right? As part of a design process, you know, it's always good to kind of establish, you know, kind of the key components, right? Or think through the key components, you know, what is the proposal? What is the design trying to achieve, right? And then run through some iterations, right, that test these goals in a variety of different ways while still staying true to the overarching goal. So what do you think the goal of your pavilion is? What were you trying to, like, what was the architecture trying to capture?
I mean, sorry. I mean, I'm trying to capture the idea that, you know, you're in New Orleans, but you're not in New Orleans at the same time. Like, yeah, you're in New Orleans, you're at Audubon Park, you're in like this more peaceful area, but you're away from St. Charles, you're away from the streetcar, you're away from all the people. So that's kind of what the
But you don't need a pavilion for that, right? You can just walk into Audubon Park.
I've been to Audubon a good amount of times, but I feel like I haven't really been able to escape the busyness that Audubon has.
And how do you think your proposal, you know, accomplishes that?
Because if you're out into like the water and you're closer to the nature and, you know, all that other stuff, all the other, you know, the people.
Okay. So the idea is one of, you know, extension, right? You know, kind of elongation, extension, right? There is, you know, some kind of, you know, like in your site plan, we talked about, you know, like placing the pavilion, right? In the previous two proposals, placing the pavilion with intent, right? So one thing that's not quite clear is why it's sitting where it's sitting in relationship to the path. It almost looks like it could be anywhere, right? So that's one thing maybe to become a little bit more specific about. But I think the intent is here that you turn off the main path, you know, and then it's right, you're extending, right, in a perpendicular way away from it, right? And so, you know, your investigations, you know, like your process diagrams, right, could have explored this idea of elongation and extension, right, away from the path, right? You know, and that could take place in different ways, right? You can talk about the right, the length. Oops, wrong way. Right, the length, right? You know, how far, right? Does it actually reach out into the water, right? What's its relationship to the existing path? What happens in between the entrance of the pavilion, right, and the path? You could also have talked about or investigated, you know, widths or proportions. Maybe it starts more narrow at the path and then becomes wider as it in plan as it reaches the water, or the other way around, right? So maybe there's a tapering, right, or a right, you know, a diagonal, right, you know, something, right, something that, you know, creates some tension, right, or an experience along the way. So there's, you know, there's a lot of different, you know, things that can be explored with this idea of kind of extension, separation, elongation, right, within this design. And I would encourage, as you move ahead, that that in the initial design phase, you spend a little bit more time thinking about what the options are before settling on one thing. So that would be my first critique here. Kentaro, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I think that I'll think about how, you know, agree with what Gorja just mentioned, and I'm thinking about two things. One is, okay, maybe I'm helping you out a little bit relative to what Corjula asked, is, you're essentially taking up the furthest corner within the given site, right? You have COPs as well. And this kind of roundabout, or this, you're taking up probably the furthest from that, but to position it. But I think, this is why siting is really important, and site analysis or mapping exercise is important to be a little bit more accurate. I was looking at the site and looking at your mapping, and I think there's more trees around here, no? Am I right? Because the trees do, shield the site a little bit more, and contributes to the space. And also, when you look at the section here, if, let's say that the tree canopy is somewhere articulated relative to your section, I think, in a way, these things, architecture is always kind of a relationship between what's there and what's not, what you're putting in. And you need to be conscientious and taking the full advantage of what's already there. And I think the, short charging these exercise, I'm not quite sure what I'm looking. And be precise. You have to document what's there first to start out with. Maybe is a good starting point for you. I like the idea, the fact that you're going out into the water, right? And technically, that may be a little bit difficult, but hey, this is your project. You can certainly think about that. But for the next thing is, okay, you're kind of on the surface, and then you go into the water. Why can't you be a little bit more bold that, you're starting out way over here and, an extension, idea extension, and go down into the ground and emerge into the water. And when you stand here, the water level is right there, almost. So, you get the perspectival view that you would never be able to get anywhere else. That, and then, that would start to, in the trees up here or something, in your shield. I don't know. I think you can, there's a way to strengthen the idea architecturally by taking a little bit more kind of bold moves relative to your idea.
Also, how do you get into this pavilion? It seems like you have to, judging from the model, you have to take a major step up. You have to jump. Is that correct? And I don't, it's more like a deck than a pavilion. A pavilion arguably, like indicates that there's some kind of shading device or more of an enclosure. But here, this is really more like a deck or a pier, right? But the model has this big step from the ground up. Is that the correct depiction?
Yeah, I mean, I figured you would just be able to enter from the side as well.
Well, but this is, we talked about directionality. You're supposed to come from the path and enter from the back and walk through this to the water, right? So that seems strange that you have to, step up 3 feet in order to get up there. It might be difficult for some people. Overall, Shane, I would recommend that you know, like maybe there's a little bit more care in the craft. Your previous two, you know, your colleagues, you know, like inserted the model or, you know, like, and which is difficult, but, you know, like into the context, you know, trying to capture, you know, what the intent of the project is. But here, you know, I don't know, like, I don't know where this was photographed, but it's not in relationship to the water, right? Which makes it then hard to understand that this is actually immersed into the water because it's really not shown anywhere. So, right, so, you know, I would, you know, spend a little bit more time, you know, like working through the presentation and making sure that the essential parts of your proposal are captured, right? So it becomes legible. Right, and then things are thought through, right? Like the big step getting into it.
Okay, we have to move on. Thank you, Shane. So we have Bella next, and then after Bella, we have a little break.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Bella, are you here?
Is it like the sound?
Yes, we can hear you. You may need to speak up a little more.
Okay, awesome. So, can we start kind of the bottom with like all the in progress, everything? Okay, thank you. So, from the very beginning of the project, I wanted to make sure that I was focusing on certain focal points within the park. Since it is such like a large area, I wanted to kind of have the viewer, whoever is inside of the pavilion, only be able to focus on certain aspects at certain times. So what I wanted to have is a focal point for the water as the pond, the sky, and then a place possibly where they both came together, or originally it was more of the grass. So you can kind of see how even from the very beginning it went to like 3 different viewing areas. And then if you could go over to like just pictures of the grotto, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Yeah, so basically when you enter into the pavilion, there's a set of stairs that you can like go up, and then you are on this upper area that is almost like it's floating. And so on the left side when you enter, maybe it might be better if you go to the site plan, actually. Thank you. Yeah. So when you're entering in through like the path area on one's entrance on the left, which is the south side, there is an area for viewing at the bottom where the pond is, as there's an overhang. And then on that right side, there is a cut in the sky to be able to only look at the sky. And then at the balcony area, which is like extended the furthest, there's a cut where only you can see through your, like, focus all the attention at eye level. And then if you go like down to the site plan that is aligned with all the sections, you can kind of see that better too. Yeah. And so even with like the benches opposing the walls to have like cuts for optimal viewing, I wanted to make sure that you still were able to enter in, and that's like the first thing you see down the hallway as it connects to the 2 main focal points of the other extending rooms. As well as there's 3 different heights to each part of the rooms and each part of the pavilion. So the lowest is the one that is closest to the ground with the pond viewing area, because you were looking at the ground, so I wanted you to feel like you were closest to the ground. The middle height is the tallest, as it also has a cut in the top to be able to have light filter in through that hall, because it's mostly enclosed. And then the middle height is the one that's viewing for the sky. And just overall, I wanted to make sure that, because like I said, the park is so large that you're really focusing on different aspects, so that you're really taking in each piece of the park and kind of taking a moment to understand like the site around you. And then if we could also go into the watercolor sketches in the bottom left of the concept board. I think this is a good way to show just like the filtering of light that you can kind of see from the one on the very left. You can see that through the top hallway where that cut is, so that there's still light filtering in to open everything up, because most of the spaces are almost totally enclosed. except for those cuts that you can see out of. Oh yeah, and then there's the, for scale interpretations, that's where you can kind of see the internal parts of the model with the seated viewing areas and showing like how the stairs have you enter up with that light filtration. And then even if you zoom in into the middle of the scale interpretations, you can see where there's somebody like inside of that viewing area off the balcony as well.
Cool. Is that it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so I think I understand the concept here from kind of an interior perspective. What's the, again, maybe we're asking everybody the same question, but why do you pick that particular location within, this is a COPS site again, right?
Yeah.
It
So
probably
in the
goes a little bit
center of
longer.
this, so in the center of the site, there's like kind of an opening where the trees are, and in Joey's presentation, he explained how like this where there's like one bench sitting. So I chose to have it kind of there, and I wanted it to overhang because this is more of the flattest area of the shore, since I knew that I wanted to have something that interacted not only on the land but over the water as well. And because of the placement of the trees, I felt like it was a spot that once it's placed, that there's a tree on both sides, which you can see in the site plan as well as my different sections on each side, how there's 2 trees on each.
So in other words, you select a position to that all, every aspect of natural, let's say, aspect of this park intersects and you can experience in one way or the other. And the concept of your pavilion is to try to isolate those moments as a view, something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly the goal, yes.
Okay. So I think, okay, so I think, you've done a pretty good job explaining that and expressing that in the model. I mean, in this design project. I think though, I'm really intrigued by these notching out the corner of the cube or the volume, rectangular volume, right? And I'm kind of looking for that experience somewhere where I can put myself in and see the sky or the see the tree or see the ground from the corner and how I feel like. And unfortunately, the scale interpretation doesn't allow me to do that. I mean, not the ground, the corner, the one on the lower corner is above the water. So that's, spectacular. Water may reflect lights and it might have little ripples on the surface and so on and so forth. So I think, maybe there's a challenge in terms of fitting the camera into the model, but maybe, those things could be you kind of plan ahead and look at those things and take photograph before you complete the assemblage of the model. Or, you make the model so that it's a take apart, or, the easier way probably would be to get one of those really tiny cameras, USB cameras, and so on and so forth. But I think, the idea is clear. You want to start constructing your drawings and presentation so that, what you're focused on shows up. And I think you can actually do that in sections too. And to a certain degree, yet, for instance, the section elevation, you know, the corners notched out. I'm looking for a water surface, but I'm not so sure that the dark line here is the water surface, or is it the ground surface? And then, you know, if this is you probably would be seeing something over here in elevation if this is indeed water, no? So on and so forth. I think, yeah, but I think you're missing, you missed the opportunity to show the strong idea that you have. How's that for a start?
Well, I think there's some really, you know, interesting aspects to this proposal. I think that center scale interpretation is really a model photograph, right? I think that's really powerful, right? And in terms of the composition of the volumes and the openings to one another. So, you know, I think you're quite successful there. I agree that, you know, moving forward, you know, even in the light and shadow studies, I think, you know, like this is a pretty dark space in there, right? If I'm not mistaken. And so you probably could have played around with some of the contrasts a little bit more. That's the watercolors at the bottom, right? Right, and really try to capture those 3 or so specific moments, you know, where the cutouts, you know, are, you know, intersecting with the interior environment. Right, so playing up that drama and, you know, really articulating that that intention of the project to the extreme, I think would be useful. But I think the right, the overall concept, right, and the certainly kind of the massing exploration of the pavilion is really interesting. And I think you also provided us with, you know, like legible drawings, right? And again, like a whole, you know, collection of different ways to look at this project, which is very nice to explore. Ultimately, at some point, things like, you know, like at least basic structural considerations, etc., would play into this, right? You have this really large cantilever, right? So something, and that's, you know, important stuff for us architects ultimately, right? But, you know, like right here, right, this is a, you know, like would have to be really drawn as kind of a thicker section because it's supporting all the load, right? And it's cantilevering. Right, so it's just something to keep in mind, you know, as you move forward, right, that you do have these, you know, like structural implications that don't have to be drawn in detail, but they can be just drawn through or expressed through thickened areas of a section versus thinner areas of a section, right, of a wall, right? So as you move forward, you know, those are the things that, you know, ultimately one should have knowledge about, and you will gain knowledge about, I'm sure.
Yeah. I would also offer, you know, this is like again a little bit more a compositional critique where, you know, I'm not sure about reading this as a 3-volume. I'm more kind of looking at this as a 1. I'm sorry, yeah, there, I missed that, and then into perhaps intersecting volume on one way to read, or you know, one volume, another volume held in distance from one another. So it starts to create tension. Maybe I'm saying both things, but that, you know, that kind of it gets a little bit too fussy when you say it's okay, 1, 2, 3, right? 3 discrete elements. And I think the key with architecture is, again, you know, maybe this is a relatively small scale project, but you know, it's aside from like a shipping tanker or something, it's one of the largest thing that human would construct. So there's an economy of scale at work. And if you can do and express things with less elements, or one architectural move takes care of 2, 3 things, that's generally better than having 2, 3, or 4 independent things that accomplishes individual things. So I would start thinking of it in that way. And I'm looking at this section. Oh, maybe okay, this is one volume, but maybe there's 2 thicker walls. Or maybe this thing itself is a thick wall conditions that's dissecting the 2 things. And then, maybe you want a lower volume. Maybe you need to really, maybe there's a loft space up there. So that's the way, or, maybe there's a way to control the ceiling height in a different way. And really, and also make really a distinction, if this you wants to be low, make it low, relative to that. Not just, maybe 2 foot or something difference, so that it gets noticed and accentuated. Okay.
Great. Okay, so thank you, Bella. We can take an 8-minute break. We'll be back at 10. And then we'll start with Charlotte after the break.
See you in a bit.
Okay. I think most people are back, so Charlotte, you can take away.
Okay. Hi, I'm Charlotte Love, and I chose site number 1 for mine, which is also the Rise site. And from my maps, if you could zoom into the second one down, that one inspired me the most because I just sat there for a little bit and like looked at the foot traffic, and I realized people didn't really follow the path as much as I really thought they would. Groups were kind of walking around wherever, and that kind of the movement of that kind of inspired me. And then we can move down to my progress work. And that first image on the top left, obviously that was just like my original sketch, and I just wrote down a lot of ideas and like some concepts I wanted to stick with. And obviously a lot has changed since that sketch, but I think I stuck with some of my concepts, which were just playfulness and just like movement and not really having like a defined space. You kind of just like move throughout wherever you wanted. And then on the right there, I have the Indian stepwells, which were kind of my next area of inspiration. Me and Annie were actually just talking about them, and I just liked the way the water moved up and down, and just like how the stairs continued to go into the water, and the like rise of the water just depended on the weather and stuff. And so then under that is just the, some exploration with the elevation and stairs, and then with those color drawings. Then that model on the bottom left was my first model, and that's kind of where I focused mostly on the stairs, and I just was playing with that and trying to like figure out how I wanted the stairs and the elevation to work and all of that. And then next to that, I decided to, after focusing on the stairs, I wanted to add some meaning to other aspects of the pavilion. So I started to seemingly place the columns like seemingly random, but they had like some meaning. There are 2 or 3 to each level of stairs. And I think they add some playfulness to it. There is a clear path that you can walk through, but you can kind of like move throughout the pavilion however you want, and the columns, you can fit through all of them, and I imagine kids like running throughout them. And then you can move to my final model where I added some more meaning to just the roof. I kept the columns and the stairs pretty similar, and then the roof, I added a I wanted to add a water feature, I guess. You can move to the axon drawing. I think that shows the water a little bit. If you zoom in, it's not very clear, I guess, but yeah, all the roofs are slanted towards a courtyard type area, and under that, there's just like a drainage site. And I imagine, so like when it rains, it's more pond-like, but all the water that collects in the roofs all go down, and you can go up to this middle section in the middle where you can see that a little clearer, how the water would work and how it would go into that drainage site. And then you can move over to the spatial conditions, where it just shows how you would move throughout the pavilion. I think I kept the goals. It's just like a playful flowing space that you can just like move throughout. I imagine people just using the stairs as seats or just walking around them. And yeah, thank you.
Oh, Corja's not. Where's Corja?
She chatted me. She has to take a quick call, but she should be back
Oh,
soon.
okay. So, well, I'm very impressed. I think this one, it's a subtle development, but quite well done. Congratulations. You know, it's you're not trying to do too much, and I think it's actually, this is kind of a right size, right scale, right moves for small projects like this one, I can buy into your narrative about the movement and the freedom. You observed something pretty fundamental. People like to move around um, and try not to do too much things actually is in your favor. Um, and I can those composite perspectival views. I can see, I can feel it. And also, you talked about, the steps first, and then it's kind of a reverse of step well. Well, maybe not, because you're moving towards the water, and but I can see how you subtly improve the way the steps are engaged with one another, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it's very good, very good. Now, I think one thing, perhaps these things are a little bit more, how can I say, my tendency. I try to really always think about one thing doing, one move doing many things, or it's kind of an economy of scale things. And I think one thing you may have been little bit over is, I think it's the different heights in your roof. Now, I'll explain this. I think you changed the roof height relative to the ground level because the ground or the platforms is shifting, the steps is shifting, but why not keep it at the same height in one thing? This way you can, because your ground level shifting is very subtle, if you have a datum above you that hold it constant, you will be able to comprehend the subtle changes in the ground topography clear. And I think that's probably more meaningful than changing 3 foot, 2 foot here, 3 foot there, relative to the ground where the height is kept the same. And you can still pitch the roof in a certain way so that the water goes into the whatever the center bioswale or whatever. Although I'm not sure you need a bioswale right at the edge of the pond, and maybe it's more spectacular to control the water in a way that when it's raining and when you're under the roof, it creates some kind of spectacular waterfall, and then creates splash along the pond water surface or something. But other than that, and I'm very intrigued. Again, the way you position and make a variation on the columns, for instance, column placement. So I think the lesson here is not everything has to be changed and variable. If you want to change certain things, you also need to think about what those changes are measured against and held some things constant. That's just the kind of a design, one of some basic kind of rules about how you go about composition.
Sorry, I missed the beginning. So I don't, in the presentation. But it looks to me that like it's a really well resolved project. I agree on the comments. I mean, it might be worthwhile, if keeping the ground non-consistent, right? The ground configuration, and keeping the roof datum consistent, right? That's very easily tested, right? With a quick model to see what that what that looks like or feels like, or if there's, you know, another way to resolve that. I agree that sometimes offsetting everything against one another, with that you lose the effect of like the main effect that you're trying to create, which is, you know, like trying to draw attention to this undulating landscape. Another thing to investigate in that regard could be not making all the steps the same depth, right? But maybe extending some of the steps out more as platforms, you know, into different directions, so one can, right, linger or assemble, right? Right now it's just steps up and down, and you know it's referencing your you know the Stepwell precedent. But I think you could think about, in the same way as the roof planes are kind of offsetting and extending, you could think about some of the steps, certainly the lower ones over the water, maybe becoming deeper, right, and becoming you know, directional and then occupiable in that regard, right? But overall, you know, I think it's you know, compositionally, I think it's really interesting and yeah, well drawn as well. You know, the exploded axon is really nicely drawn. So are the sections, and I appreciate the consideration in regards to the water collection and direction. So good job.
Oh, it seems like we have some time for us. It's very well resolved project. So do you have any questions for us?
Not really, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't really think about any questions.
Again, I want to just emphasize that, you know, just changing these little things here. For instance, I'm looking at your, I'm sorry, I screwed up. I'm looking at your model photos. Yeah. For instance, you know, this versus that versus this. I know you gave quite a bit of thought on how these things engaged in the platform. Just, you know, just the size and the shape of the steps and how it overlaps, where it stops, so on and so forth. And it's a subtle thing, but I just wanted to emphasize that's design. I think, you know, you have to know sort of the every inch of how the moves that you make and relative to your design intent. So, you know, and those things aren't really, I don't think students at the beginning think about these things. So yeah, congratulations. Like, you know, this, again, this column meeting this height here, this one is over here. There's a subtle floating condition here. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Charlotte. We're gonna move on to John next.
So for my project, my biggest intention was to take advantage of this beautiful tree that is on the site. If you go to the collage, you can see a representation of what the tree looks like. Essentially, there's this giant branch that goes all the way from the tree, which is essentially next to the path, all the way to the water. There's enough room underneath it to put a pavilion. So my intention, if you could go to the site plan and roof plan, was to put a structure. The tree is essentially right up it, and I wanted to put it on the flattest plane possible. So there's essentially, it only goes 1 foot around. Yes, thank you. And it only rises a foot between these two lines. Means this I chose the canopy site because of this purpose. And it allowed me a lot more flexibility on the shape of the building itself. If you go to the plan view, as you can see, the tree pretty much the branch just drapes itself over the structure, and the structure uses it as a visual point, and it's not necessarily meant to be structural, because it definitely is not, but it acts as a second railing on the other side to kind of tell people, hey, don't go much further, essentially. Originally, in my first design of the drawing in the model, I had the tree as kind of a structure that kids almost play with the branch, but after further review, that's just not practical. It's not safe for the tree itself. So I ended up changing away from that design, where the branch pretty much goes down the middle, and you walk up this L-shaped staircase, and you end to the one I am currently using, where you walk up a straight staircase to get up to the top, and the tree is on the other side of the final lamp. So you are essentially you have risen to the height of the trees. You are essentially where the birds and the squirrels and the other animals rest. You are essentially intertwined with not the level that us normal humans would be standing at, but you are at where the tree lives, where the birds live, and the squirrels and all other animals. And if you go to my section cuts, I made this staircase, and it has a built-in bench that essentially acts as it's structurally put together in the same structure, and then essentially that created a structural member of the building itself. Has these screens, has these railings, and has these pavers to keep it away from the roots. But the main structure of the building is the staircase and bench, where everything else builds out of. Unfortunately, on my model plan, I could not get the actual platform to stay level, so it doesn't look the best, but I hope you can appreciate the representation I made with models. Also, and it is my project.
It looks like there was a tornado and the tree lost a limb and landed on the pavilion in the model. I appreciate the attempt, but there might be a better way of showing it. You could also, I appreciate that you try to use the real material, but maybe that could have also been abstracted as a gesture. The other thing that you're missing here is the upper level railing in the model, right? Which seems to be pretty important, because it's the contrast, right, between, the railing that is designed as part of the pavilion, right? And then the existing tree branch, right, as a means of contrasting that. So I think it would have been helpful in the model to complete the railing. You have it in your drawings, but you don't have it in the model. So, right, as something to keep in mind. And then, like in regards to your drawings, I mean, if that's the idea giver, right? That there's projects that do that, right? Where there is, a tree or other existing, natural elements, let's say parts of the landscape, right, that are incorporated in the architecture, or the architecture, right, is built in dialogue with it, or, in contrast to it, right? So I think as a concept, that's pretty interesting, right? How do you create that dialogue, and what does that mean for your architectural response? But what we're missing here is then, like a more precise depiction of that tree branch, as much as you can, articulate it. It wasn't drawn in the site plan, right? As the tree itself is not depicted. That seems to be pretty crucial. That's why we draw a site plan, to capture some stuff existing in the context, right? And then your plan is also drawn through the lower level, but the lower level doesn't seem to contain much information right now. I'm also not sure how you get in there. It seems like you have to walk around the entire pavilion and enter from the back side, from the water side. But what seems to be more important is the upper level, and how the branch is situating itself in relationship again to the railing, right? And then like I drew that little circle, red circle in the section. You're also not drawing it in the section, because arguably you would be cutting through the tree trunk, right? Or the tree branch rather.
Yes.
Right. So those relationships, and also, what the height relationship is, right, between the trunk and the deck, right, the upper level deck, right, and what the distances are between the top of the deck and also the edge of the railings. That's pretty important, right, because that's what frames the most important moment in your project, right? Are they butting up, are they held back, like, is the branch floating above the deck, what's the distance, right? So how do you create that dialogue, spatially and physically, right, between your architecture, right, and that existing component? So, right, if that's the focus of the project, that's what you need to hone in and be really precise about in terms of your depictions, right? Draw like assume a cross section through the branch, right, and draw that the same way, right, in all your drawings, right, or like that then translates into an elevation, right? It's a presumed thickness, and you work with that thickness, right? You also work with that relationship between height of tree branch to the ground, right, and then situating your proposal in there, right? So you establish, a set of data points, right, for the tree, and then you create your project around that, right? That doesn't change, right? You just assume that that's what it is, and then you draw your project always in the same relationship to that, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. I will make a comment about, I totally agree with what Corjo said about the positioning and the strategy there. So I'm kind of looking at the model and judging from the model, the way you make your stair is a very sort of dense, right? It's solid, with made out of these horizontal stackings that extends to your, I think this is a bench, and it's the, how can I say, it's a very solid stereotomic. I don't know if you guys engaged in the word tectonic stereotomic. It's earth-like, a solid elements that generally considered to emerge out of the ground, right? On the other hand, but this platform over here on the side, if you can go to the axo, just shift slightly and go to the axo. Yeah, is articulated in with the legs. So that's more what we call tectonic. It's made out of long, skinny elements, and to a certain degree, this part is the same. So I'm kind of wondering then the distinction, this is curious, right, over here. You're putting a stereotomic element on top of the tectonic platform.
Well, initially I had the platform and the stairs just resting on the ground, but in the last review, it was pointed out to me that this would be damaging to the roots. So I didn't want to necessarily redesign my whole
Yeah.
structure, but I wanted to keep the roots safe. So
I mean, yeah, the roots. Yeah, I think that's a interesting point, and I think that at that point you probably needed to re-articulate the strategy for the stair, because it doesn't make sense anymore to make, if this was not damaging the roof, I would say, the stair actually goes into the ground, and then that's the primary structural elements that these platforms are perhaps hanging off of, right? So on and so forth. That's an expressive opportunity. If that's the part is fundamentally challenged, then you need to shift gears and design the stairs in a little bit more tectonic manner. That's just a little. I think there's a good instinct about the structure itself and how it engages the ground, but your positioning actually made it move. So that's another kind of thing. Why, if that's the case, maybe you move it. And find a positioning that suit your intent. Maybe this thing actually moves out to the edge of the water, and at that point I don't think the root's an issue, and the stereotomic staircase is at the edge, and then all these things are suspended off of it, and it's close enough to the edge of the branch, but not quite. It doesn't engage in the same way that you're engaging here. That's okay.
We have 2 more minutes.
I think the majority of the comments, important comments were made already. I like the idea of using the branch as, kind of a railing configuration. I agree that moving the pavilion forward towards the water edge would also, I don't know, probably would put it in a more in a better relationship. I'm not sure what that means, better relationship with the branch, because it becomes an extension and it moves towards the edge of the branch, which then becomes kind of like an interesting, again, dialogue with the existing tree and its location. So I would investigate that. And then the ground level, it's not quite clear what it does at the moment, or what it offers. Again, the access to it, getting into it is a little cumbersome. Again, I have to take a big step up to enter from the water side into it. And, maybe you could think about other things that could take place there, right? That differentiated from the upper level in terms of how you occupy it. I mean, are there any built-in components? Can I sit anywhere? I don't see that at the moment that is a consideration. Are there, is there a built-in bench at least along the stair in the back, that allows for a view out or something like that, right? So that's a little undercooked at the moment, with the full attention giving to the relationship to the tree branch. And we already, I think, commented on the opportunities there.
There is a built-in bench built in.
Oh, okay, I see it in the elevation. Yeah. Okay.
All
It
right.
might be. It's just a little cumbersome to me that you have to walk all the way around to enter it. Okay.
Okay, thank you, John. Next we have Tyler. Tyler, you ready?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Tyler. In this project, I started with mapping and mapping out the area. I chose the first site, which was Rise, which had the hill, and I was also really drawn to this site. I was initially really drawn to this site because of the Spanish moss trees, and which are like my favorite type of trees. You know, I've seen anywhere but down here, and I right off the bat, my conceptual goal was to frame the views of the Spanish moss and the lagoon. I started my design with. Can you scroll down to my progress work? In the top right corner, these are my first two models on the site plan. Yeah, you can see. So I started my conceptual design goal with three different spaces that the user could walk through, with one area framing a view of the trees or the Spanish moss trees, one area facing and hanging over the lagoon, and the third would isolate a view of the sky, with an aperture in the ceiling to isolate the sky. And as I distilled and extracted my best ideas and advanced through my design process, I combined two of the spaces so that the area with the aperture isolating the sky would also get it. The user would also get a view of the Spanish moss trees, which would be hanging over the aperture in the ceiling. And I also made the decision to have one entrance/exit, so the user is forced to walk through the spaces twice, and really get a glimpse of everything in the pavilion. For the area framing the view of the lagoon, I originally had solid walls. So if you can scroll down to the bottom of my progress work, this is my second to last model. So you can see the area that would be hanging over the lagoon, which is the one in the second picture in the sequence right there. And you can see the walls on the fourth picture over there, how they were solid, and there was no like holes or apertures in them. But then I decided, I was also playing around with opening up the area with the skylight, so you can see there's like kind of holes or apertures that allow the flow of the light through there, through different areas in there. And then I kind of took a step back and wanted to fully isolate that skylight or the aperture in the ceiling. So I decided to place the apertures in the entrance and entrance/exit, as well as the area that the user would experience the lagoon as well. So my apertures are now in those two spaces instead of as you can see in my most recent model. So in terms of the positioning of the spaces and the pavilion, I placed the entrance of the pavilion on the left if you were facing the lagoon, because I noticed that most foot traffic and bike traffic in the park was counterclockwise, which would mean that the entrance would be the first part of the pavilion that the users would see. And to bring bikers and walkers from the path, to the pavilion, I made a path that leads the user from the walking path down to the pavilion. And to go back to the app, you can see in my plan, right, my top plan drawing how there's a path that extends to the from the walking path to the entrance of the pavilion. And let's see, with the
Or if you
apertures,
could
so if you,
wrap up, please.
yeah, I'm pretty much done. So, I mean, that's basically all I have. If you can go down to my most recent models, I just want to explain how the apertures just allow the flow of sunlight throughout the day and create pretty unique shadows. And that's basically all I got.
Good. All right. So let's see. Yeah, all in all, I think the strategy seems sound. Could you hold for just the let's see.
What do you think, Tyler, is the most the most exciting part of your proposal to you?
To me, it would be the third space, or the area with the, you mean like which space is the most exciting?
Yeah, or the
out
most
of three?
important. Yeah. When you say
Definitely,
3, what is, can you say again what 1, 2, 3 is?
well, it's actually 2, but I mean there's an entrance, so the third would be the entrance. But the main ones are just the area where the user would experience the lagoon, and then also the isolated skylight, or the aperture in the ceiling. And
So both are
definitely
equally important.
well, yeah, they are both equally important in terms of the like the makeup of the pavilion and the 2 views that the user are going to experience that I wanted to isolate and wanted to like build up to. So, but from me, I would say that from the get-go, the focal point, or the most important to me, was the area with that isolated the sky and the Spanish moss, because the Spanish moss was why I chose this site to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see in the axon, you can see in my sections that tree, you'll catch a glimpse of the tree. You can see, if you scroll up a little bit to the second section, you can see the scale figure sitting down and looking up at the Spanish moss branches in the sky. And that was a moment that I really wanted to make happen in this pavilion.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything magic in the squarish footprint of both volumes? Right. The reason why I'm asking is, you know, they both have the same, more or less the same proportion, right? You have, let's see, right? You have, right, 1, right? And then you have the other one, right? That's kind of what you have, right? And then, right, the spaces, right, the circulation spaces in between. But they have different intents, right? So one is like looking out into the water, right? And then the other one is looking right up into the tree, right? So I'm wondering if there's not an opportunity to treat them differently, right? Maybe, right, in terms of their massing, right? Maybe one is elongated, right? and then the other one is maybe elongated vertically, or right. So there's the spaces enhance the intent, right, of the idea of occupancy, right. I don't think I guess I don't really understand the reason why there's two equally kind of sized and proportioned boxes. That would be one comment. The other thing that I find a little curious is the relationship to the ground, the foundations, I guess. You decided to make this kind of seamless, right? So when I look from the side, it's not what the model is showing, right? The model, and I think that's really your intent, right? Your boxes are they're floating, right, above the ground, right?
Yeah.
And they're suspended, but your sections don't do that, right? They don't show it that way. They show it as a continuous, right? And like the sections, it could be a continuous wall. Your axonometric is showing, like the posts coming down at the four corners, which really doesn't have to be the case either, right? You can offset foundation from exterior walls, but so I would be clearer about my intent there. It seems like the model view is where you want to go, right? Where, like it's a more, right? It's kind of a, detached relationship from the ground, right? Again, one kind of extending out towards the water, and then one being slightly lifted up even, right? Right, so that's accentuated to engage with the verticality of the tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all three have they're at different heights. So the entrance would be on ground level.
I wouldn't consider the entrance as a separate, it's not a space, right? It's just, it's a set of steps that you're moving through. So you really have two spaces, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then,
I
but the main spaces are both almost floating or raised off the ground.
I'm trying to, I think one thing that sort of bothers me, I think here is the thickness of the wall relative to the size of the space, number one, and the relationship, and I'm thinking about the delicate, thin, sort of scragginess of the Spanish moss, and that the quality that represents, and this kind of thick, very sort of confined sense of a stereotomic condition. And then, Corgela already mentioned a little bit about how the cube is, floating versus engaging the ground. Those are the sort of the points that makes me slightly sort of, feel that the project is a little bit undercooked. I mean, everything you said sort of makes sense to me. There's a focus, but how do you take that a notch above take that quality into consideration? And, maybe there's an argument to be said about this very thick stereotomic condition accentuates the sensuality of the Spanish moth. So then if that's the case, then it's a stereotomic condition where it needs to kind of emerge out of the ground and, engage the ground, again, tree roots. We have to think about the tree roots, and the positioning of the pavilion may not be as tight as what you have here. And then, these little bit more opaque condition might be floating, supported by the stereotomic structure, and its light and area and tectonic. I think that's where, the project, you have it pretty well configured in terms of logistics and the narrative. I really wanted to see that sort of next level of refinement, so to speak. And then, and then those things expressed in terms of the the scale interpretation drawings, and also some quality. I think site collage is actually important to really think about the quality of the Spanish moss if you're kind of really asphyxiated on that. That informs the structure. And if we could see just a little bit of that, I think you know, that would have been wonderful.
Yeah, I agree that the relationship between the thickness of the walls and the space that is, you know, not carved out almost, that is occupiable is a little bit, you know, it's not quite right, right? You don't have much space left over to occupy because the walls are so thick. And the question is that intentional, right? The thickness, or is it just, you know, because, you know, you need to know about more about how you should draw the wall and what they're made of, you know, in relationship to that. It just feels, it feels very tight inside, you know, for not an apparent reason at the moment. Again, unless it's intentional. And then I would also encourage, I mean, the tree, right? It was intentional, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we can talk about what they're made of, but again, the proportion doesn't seem to be quite right. That relationship between space that is occupiable and the thickness of the walls. You're not, you know, the space that's left over specifically in the skylight room is just very tight, and then I would encourage, you know, I think there's some really good thoughts in the project, you know, and you know, the way you explained it also indicates that you really, you know, you thought this through. But I encourage to, you know, when a tree plays such an important role, and all of you are capable of, you know, doing amazing drawings by hand, you know, if nothing else, you know, trace it, but I would draw it a little bit more realistically. It just doesn't feel like the type of oak tree we would encounter at Audubon Park, right? In terms of, you know, like the configuration of the branches, and then the delicacy of the moss and its length also, you know, it hangs down pretty low in parts, right? So if that's really important to your project, I would just spend a little bit more time drawing the tree with care, you know, if that makes sense, right?
Okay, we need to move on.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you, Tyler. So last but not least, we have Kai. He's right here. And then after Kai, we'll all join in the main room for final comments. Not very well. Can you speak up? I can hear very, very faint. Is that just from me, or is everyone else having it?
No, Kai, can you speak up, please?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Oh, better.
That's better.
It's better. Okay, sweet. Hello, I'm Kai. So let's can we just start with the site maps? So I chose the third site, which is the access or the entrance to the park, and I was initially drawn to it. I mean, partially just because it's the entrance, so it's like where I entered the park. But then also I could hear the ducks. Out in the afternoons, there's a bunch of ducks out on the water, and I could hear them from super far away, quacking, being really loud. So I was like immediately drawn to that. And so I walked into the site, and so that's the very first map I drew up here on the top left is the interaction between the ducks and the fountains. And I was exploring how the fountains and like the water spray dictated where the ducks were and how they swim around. And that kind of inspired me to look at the interactions present between next up with squirrels and trees, and just like how squirrels were moving around. And then the path and different modes of transportation and how people were interacting with the site. And so then I think that helped me get a good idea of the site. And if we just go straight down from there to the site collages, the one on the right is further exploring the trees, and just because I was really noticing that people were kind of walking around the trees and interacting with them. And that was dictating how people moved around the site a lot more than the path or anything else. And then the one on the left is more of an elevation of the clearing, which you can see if we go up to the site plan, straight up. There's this kind of nice clearing that's off the axis, but it's framed really nicely by all the trees. And I was noticing people there's a dirt path on the left side. Very it's very unintentional, but just so many people have walked along there, along the water, and then from the path to this clearing, there's kind of this impromptu dirt path that's been created. And then there's also this diagonal line that I aligned my pavilion along that kind of continues from the axis of park entrance. And so it just seemed like a very natural place to put a pavilion. And again, it's like kind of where it was drawn because of the animals and just all the different views that were there. So then if we just go over to the right, you can look at the plans and sections here. So the whole idea with my pavilion is I really enjoyed the different things that brought me to the site, and I wanted to interact with them and use this idea of like carving combined with extrusion. So this lower layer here is completely carved out from into the ground, and it's getting you as close to the water as possible without directly interfering with it. And then I kind of contrast that with an extrusion of this larger cantilevered shape, this larger cantilevered mass up top that gets you, it rises you up close to the level of the trees, allows you to see a little bit further up and down the river and also over the trees on the other side of the bank, like into the golf course, and then it gives you a really nice view of the sunset as well. So that was kind of the central idea of the project, this kind of combination and contrast of carving out of the ground to get close to the water and what drew me to the site, combined with the extrusion up top. And then from there we can go to the scale interpretations. These are mainly just trying to show like the different interactions you get approaching. This one on the far left is approaching the site from the axis, or sorry, approaching the pavilion from the axis, and looking into it. I think it shows really well the carved out low with the extrusion up top. And then the other two are looking into the area and the spaces that's created down below, and how the extrusion above interacts with that as well. And then we can just go to the iterations, the drawing model iterations. So yeah, these first two sketches are pretty early on in my process. The one on the far left, this top left one, was just looking at the site and our box creations and seeing the different spaces we could create. So I was moving it up and down, and that kind of helped inform this idea of extrusion and carving out that I really liked. The one to the right is like a very early sketch of that. And then these model pictures here, the wooden one just directly to the right is the first quarter scale model I made, and then the chipboard one below is actually the next one I made. That kind of further enhanced the ideas of carving out, and I like bought into that a little bit more, and extruded the top more, got rid of the holes coming down, and made this mass more solid up top, and then also carved out even more and got closer to the water down below, which I really liked, and carried into my final model here, which is just to the left. And then I have the 4 different images of the model to the left here. The top 2 are the different angles that you would approach on. The one on the left is approaching from the right, and looking down more into the extruded part, and the one from the left is, the one on the right is looking at it from the left.
to the, sorry, that was from next year. And then the other two, one of them, the bottom right one is looking at it from the axis view, and then the bottom left one is looking at it from the water view, which is not a view you really get of it, but it helps look into the lower area and see the interactions there. And then, yeah, we can just finish with the axon. It's an exploded axon, so the top part is exploded upwards, just so you can see the full lower area. Yeah, and then you have these really unique trees that I found that kind of shape the area, and I just drew one of them here, because that's the one it's the one that's closest the most informs where the actual model is.
Are you done?
Yep.
Okay.
Professor Rosagray, maybe you want to jump in first because you have to leave.
Yes, that's correct. Kai, I really, I really, I think there's some really, interesting moves in this proposal. I do like the overall outcome. I think there's an elegance, visible in some of these model shots where, in regards to how the two components, right, the upper level and then the sunken level intersect. I have a little bit of a hard time orienting myself in regards to, and maybe because there's a couple of different iterations in regards to, like there's one that's showing the front stepping, like the lower part, there's a couple of additional steps towards the railing, right? But that's not, do I see that everywhere? Maybe it's not present everywhere. Right, in some of these scale interpretation model shots, that's missing, right? That these additional two steps going towards the water.
Oh yeah,
Is that correct?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, those
Okay.
were, those were just from an earlier iteration.
Okay. And you decided to lower it so you could actually see out from that back bench. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And that, yeah, so initially I had like an L-shaped bench, and the lower area was like 5 feet below ground level, which I figured was probably
right.
much to see out of. So I lowered that and got closer to the water, so you could
right.
get closer to it.
Yeah, I mean, like the project is about those relationships, right? You have like if you go to your section, right, you have the ground line, right? And then, you move up and down from that datum line, right? And I think there is, oops, I meant to use the eraser. There is, a certain, there is, different sets of relationships that could be explored here, stepping it further down towards the water is one. I'm not sure if, it almost feels like an afterthought to add those two steps in order to see out. But you could also have played around or play around with the relationship of, the upper level to the lower level, right? How far the upper level rises, also how far it extends out, by the way. I mean, it could arguably extend out further over the water, right? To get this idea of, or feeling of suspension, right? And exploration, or, so the relationship of upper and lower level in plan and how far they extend out over the water. And then the relationship of the two levels to each other, right? As you move up and move into the ground. I think there's different ways of resolving that, right? Other than, or in addition to having to, add those two steps in order to get the sight line in the right location. There's also, right, so you could continue to play around with that if you wanted to. There's also, an unnecessary thickness right here that you don't need, right? That might help to, first of all, not hit your head when you're sitting down on the bench, but also might help with, like just, like orchestrating, right? Or designing that relationship better, right? So some of these, some of these, even here, right? This is pretty thick. You probably don't need that because you don't see it anywhere. So, right, so you could, right, the way the section is cut here, right, or articulated, right, is right, is something that could be right, worked with further, or thought about in a couple of different ways. Are those glass railings?
Yeah, that was the idea. Definitely
Okay.
on the bottom, and I think on top it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's how I would start.
Yeah,
With the
I mean,
critique.
there's so a few of those things I had explored earlier, which I guess I probably should have put in the sketch work or process work, but like in terms of the size of the top, or like how far it's extending, I thought about extending it like up to, so that the two were like parallel with each other, I guess perpendicular to the same distance or even further. But what I found is that it didn't allow for any light into the lower area. So I thought, and I didn't think it added a whole lot more, which is why I decided to, I actually ended up moving it a little bit further back for this final iteration. And then for the solid mass there, that was something I still think, I agree, I think that could be worked on. I ended up just mirroring like the angle of the stairs so that the incline and slope was the same there. And I wanted to, I think it's easiest to probably see in one of the final model photos, but I wanted it to, going off the idea of extrusion from the ground. Yeah, either one of those top two, I think, or actually this bottom left one shows it pretty well.
Yeah, so it looks like there's
like as flush with that side.
Yeah, it looks like the railing is kind of hiding, but that space behind, but that doesn't mean that, right, the space behind that exists can be, occupiable, right? It doesn't have to have that thickness.
So, yeah, I was appreciating the site strategy first and the diagrams that you construct. I think one thing, these diagrams in the plan, are they in right orientation to one another?
The sections in the
Look here, this one, is that north? This is north, right?
Oh, no.
This one is, I
There's a
think,
little,
flipped, no? These are minor things, but I really like what you're trying to do here to sort of capture all of them are opposite, right? So because this is the water, this is the water. Anyway, I think I like the kind of seriousness you took into consideration the site analysis. So I want to kind of see how these things kind of stack up and inform your site strategy here. And I think it actually would tell you more about the quality of what this wants to be than what you're sort of able to take advantage. There's, I agree with Korja, there's something elegant about the sections and two sort of subtle sectional moves, up, one down, so on and so forth. But I'm slightly apprehensive about the axiality, the very rigid axiality that comes between those two conditions, and especially if one of your Q is that. And considering the fact that things that move somewhat a little bit more organically. So if this is the case, I think there's a little bit more accentuated way of stabilizing the condition, in a way, marking the ground in a constant frozen condition that then somehow illustrate and elevate the movement and the aggregation of the ducks or squirrels or whatnot, and so that you can actually, how can I say, those things experience gets elevated. But again, the kind of the two squares sort of equally weighted seems, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think there's a good enough explanation at the moment if to justify that. And I say this in particular because your sort of analytical process was quite strong. The other thing, and that sort of equality between the two axes also manifests in terms of kind of the again, heaviness of equally heaviness of the upper floor and the ground floor. It almost feel like the way you're drawing. It's both floors are both levels, and the whole construct are made out of cast in place concrete or something. A pretty kind of a brutal condition relative to the site and the nature of the thing. And I'm trying to kind of reconcile if there's a little bit, how can I say, a lighter way of doing it, or less, a little bit more kind of, how can I say, efficient way of whether we can achieve the same thing with a lighter touch, I guess. But those are the kind of the questions. I think the way you were explaining the project seems jives with me. But those are the kind of the project resolutions that somewhat bothers me a bit.
Okay, we need to move into the main group.
Yeah.
But thank you to everyone. And I'll have Zach just close the.
Yeah, we'll close the breakout room, so we probably can take a 3-minute break. I asked the people in the other room to come back at 11:10. Oops, 2 minutes now. So maybe we can just move and get started on the discussions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll close rooms now and see you back in the